Hello, welcome to the Economic Development Administration's webinar on EDA CARES Act non-competitive awards. If you did not receive an invitation for a non-competitive award, you're in the wrong webinar. Please go back and find the other one. Today, we're going to talk about the CARES Act, the non-competitive awards specifically, the procedures, post-award requirements, and we'll get into some frequently asked questions. Under the CARES Act, EDA was appropriated $1.5 billion. 1.467 of that is available for grants. The rest of it was for oversight and salaries and expenses to administer it. And it's important to know that the funds are available through September 30, 2022. So that is the time period in which EDA will need to make all of its awards. We're making a majority of the funds available under our Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Notice of Funding Opportunity. It's available on grants.gov. And the CARES Act is a 5-page addendum at the back of the NOFO. The last 5 pages are the special rules that relate to it. We're going to do 2 parallel processes under the NOFO. One is we're going to do our normal competitive process where you apply under the NOFO and follow all the rules. You'll have to look at the last 5 pages to make sure you understand what those special rules are for the CARES Act. And otherwise, if you're doing the competitive process, you should be in the other webinar. If, on the other hand, you are actually receiving an invitation from us, you should be following the non-competitive process, and this webinar is specifically for you. That process, the non-competitive process, is open by invitation only.
There are a few key things to know about awards under the non-competitive process. The first is the justification for those non-competitive awards. There's been, I guess, an economic injury, which is that the coronavirus pandemic and the social distancing measures related to it have caused a sudden and severe economic dislocation throughout the country. So basically, all parts of the country are eligible for non-competitive awards, meaning that no part of the country has current recipients excluded from the non-competitive process by virtue of not being affected by the coronavirus because it affects all parts of the country. So for that reason, EDA has determined that economic injury from the coronavirus pandemic constitutes a special need, and like I said, that means nationwide eligibility for these funds. And the practical effect of that is that applicants don't need to demonstrate additional economic distress to be eligible. They just have to show that they're impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, which again is nationwide. EDA has determined that the suddenness and the scale of the economic dislocation constitutes a situation of unusual and compelling urgency, such that it's in the public interest to make certain awards non-competitively available to expedite EDA's response and award of the CARES Act funds. So what is a non-competitive award? What's the difference between a competitive award under CARES Act and a non-competitive award? Well, a non-competitive award is made to a predetermined group of recipients. So it's a single class or type of recipients. And the idea is that for entities in this class, in this case recipients, that the competitive process is not necessary or not desirable. Now, the advantage of non-competitive awards in this context is that it allows EDA to get these non-competitive awards out really quickly and respond to the circumstances of the coronavirus pandemic. And specifically, EDA can use simplified application procedures, and there's not a merit review process. So those two things together mean that the non-competitive awards will go out faster. Now, there's one caveat, and that is that the awards must be uniform. So for the most part, there's not any difference in the awards. They have the same scope of work. The maximum award amount are similar or calculated by a uniform formula, and they can't be tailored to applicants' circumstances or preferences. So that means that if you're interested in doing something really interesting that doesn't fall under the scope of a non-competitive award, you can apply under the competitive process, but you couldn't do that really interesting project or that really atypical project that doesn't match the scope of these non-competitive awards under the non-competitive process. And I think that this point that awards must be uniform is a really important one, that in the non-competitive process, you're really just working under the scope of the non-competitive awards. We're treating the whole class equally, and everybody gets to do the same, gets to have the same award. If you're interested in doing something else, come under the competitive process. So there are 3 classes of existing EDA recipients that will be eligible for non-competitive awards. First class is district organizations and tribes that currently receive EDA Partnership Planning Awards. The second are universities that currently receive EDA University Center grants. And the third are current recipients of EDA Revolving Loan Fund grants. If your entity is not in one of these 3 classes, you will not receive an invitation to apply for a non-competitive award. But again, you may apply under the competitive process. In terms of the process for those non-competitive awards, EDA is going to send invitation letters, or has already, for the most part, sent invitation letters to all eligible recipients of non-competitive awards. And those eligible recipients for non-competitive awards are recipients who are currently in substantial compliance with the terms and conditions of their awards and whose awards aren't in the process of being suspended or terminated. So if your award suspended or termination's underway, you will not receive an invitation to apply for a non-competitive award. Additionally, for RLF recipients will only receive an invitation to apply for a non-competitive RLF award if their RLF awards are rated an A or a B in EDA's risk analysis system. Entities with RLF awards rated a C through EDA's risk analysis system will not be invited for a non-competitive award. But again, such entities that do have suspended or terminated awards or do have C-rated RLFs may apply under the competitive process, and that's competitive, so the merits of those applications will be reviewed sort of distinct from this non-competitive process. If for some reason you believe you should qualify or you should have received an invitation letter for a non-competitive award, but you have not, please contact your EDA Economic Development Representative, and state-by-state economic development representatives are available on EDA's website at eda.gov/contact.
So to introduce a little bit more detail into the types of non-competitive awards that are being offered, the awards, first of all, that are being offered to district organizations and tribes follow a standard scope of work that includes 4 elements. Planning and coordination to draft or update disaster recovery and resiliency plans, focused on pandemic recovery. Funding for regional disaster economic recovery coordinators to serve the communities in the EDD region or tribal territory. Technical assistance for organizations, businesses, and other local stakeholders, and capacity support for recipients to assist in implementing the scope of work. Capacity support can include things like personnel costs, technology upgrades, supply costs, and, if appropriate, equipment costs. Recipients can choose to implement any of the foregoing elements to the scope of work. It's not necessary for recipients to implement all 4. Capacity support costs, however, are only available to support one of the other 3 elements of the scope of work. EDA has drafted this scope of work purposefully to be broad so that each recipient can choose specific activities tailored to the needs of their region that will further these 4 broad scope of work goals. The maximum award amount for district organizations is $400,000, and the maximum award amount for tribes is $150,000. We would like to stress that these are maximum award amounts. Applicants are not required to request the full amount if your project will not require that level of funding.
What if an entity was interested in more funding than those caps? What could they do in that situation?
So an entity that wanted to pursue a project with a scope of work of this nature with a higher funding level could apply through the competitive process. EDA cannot, however, make awards in excess of the maximum amount through the non-competitive process. So for university centers, it's a similar basic format to the EDD and tribe grants. There's a standard scope of work. This one has 5 elements that includes providing technical assistance to entrepreneurs and businesses, moving courses to support business and entrepreneurial community to an online platform, activities to support technology commercialization, product development, and manufacturing that are directed towards addressing the coronavirus pandemic, the conducting, sharing, and disseminating of applied research to address local economic challenges resulting from the pandemic, and other assistance to communities with workforce training and professional development. As with the EDD and tribal grants, recipients can select from among the foregoing scope of work activities. It is not necessary to implement all 5 activities. And again, as with the EDD and tribal grants, applicants have a degree of freedom to select specific activities and tasks that will allow them to fulfill those 5 broad goals in a way that best serves their local region. The maximum award amount for University Center awards is $300,000. Again, applicants are welcome to request less funding if that's all that's necessary for their proposed scope of work, but EDA cannot award more than the maximum amount of funding through the non-competitive process. Revolving loan fund awards will be slightly different. EDA will make a single supplemental award to eligible revolving loan fund recipients for 2 purposes. 1, to provide additional lending capital, and 2, for administrative expenses to assist with deploying that capital in the community, and to help the RLF respond to other needs related to the coronavirus pandemic. The maximum amount of additional lending capital that a recipient may request is determined by a formula that is based on the recipient's existing capital base and their cash available for lending. And the capital base that is used for this calculation is the combined capital base of all EDA-funded RLFs under the recipient's management. So if you do have more than one RLF currently that's funded by EDA, you will be invited to apply for 1 grant only, but the fact that you have multiple RLFs will be taken into account in calculating the maximum award amount. The maximum amount of administrative funding is 10% of the additional lending capital requested. So this is the amount of capital requested, not the maximum award amount. So for example, if your maximum award amount were $1 million, but you decided to only request an additional $500,000 in additional lending capital, then the maximum amount of administrative expenses would be 10% of that additional capital, or $50,000. Administrative funds may be used to support a wide variety of activities necessary to manage the RLF, including the hiring of additional staff or the acquisition of upgraded technology. If you request additional lending capital, you are not required to request administrative funding, but we do encourage applicants to request sufficient funding to enable them to deploy the additional lending capital quickly. So just to briefly go over some of the general terms and conditions applicable to these awards. All awards will be made at a 100% federal grant rate. That means that no local matching share is required. EDA will fund 100% of eligible project expenses up to the maximum award amount. The period of performance for all of these awards is 24 months from the date of award, and that's very important. We expect all of these projects to be started and finished within the period of performance. As I said before, applicants may request less than the maximum award amount, this is an important point. Applicants should only request the amount of funds that they think they can productively use during that 24-month period of performance. And this is to ensure that funds are available for other potential projects that EDA may be able to fund. Applicants will not be discouraged, or disadvantaged, I should say, in the non-competitive or the competitive processes if they request less than the maximum amount of funding. Applicants who accept a non-competitive award may also apply in the competitive process for a different scope of work. RLF recipients who disperse the full amount of their non-competitive grant at that time may request additional funding if they choose.
You know, you mentioned that the period of performance for all awards is all of these non-competitive awards is limited to 24 months. If there's a project that's anticipated to take longer than 24 months, should an entity submit an application under the competitive process instead?
Yes, that would be the right way to go about that application. The 24-month period of performance is going to be standard across all non-competitive awards, and as we'll be discussing a little bit later, extensions of that period of performance will only be granted in rare circumstances. So as I was just saying, for all of these awards, time is of the essence. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the goal of the non-competitive awards program is to make sure that CARES Act supplemental funding is put to work in our communities as quickly as possible. For that reason, it is important that all recipients adhere closely to the project performance time schedule and the timeline for implementing their awards. All non-competitive awards will include a specific award condition confirming that time is of the essence. What that means is that if EDA determines that a recipient is not making adequate progress towards completion of their project, EDA may deem that recipient to not be in compliance with the award and take appropriate action to respond to that noncompliance. Importantly for RLF recipients, if at any time EDA determines that the recipient is unlikely to disperse the full amount of the additional lending capital during the period of performance, again, within that 24-month period of performance, then EDA may decide to deobligate all or part of the undispersed grant funds. And again, this is because we want to make sure that all of the funding gets put to use quickly and productively, and because of the time-limited nature of the funds, which means that all funding has to be awarded no later than September 30th, 2022. Another important condition that you may not be familiar with from your existing awards is that all recipients of non-competitive awards will be required to request disbursements at least quarterly. And the reason for that, again, is to make sure that funds are being put to work in the community as quickly as possible. And as I said before, because time is of the essence in these awards, no-cost time extensions will only be rarely granted for compelling reasons.
So moving into the application process, eligible applicants have already received or will soon be receiving an invitation letter with details on how to apply, including the required documentation. Under this simplified application process for these awards, applicants must submit a short project narrative outlining the activities to be included in their scope of work and how these activities will help their region respond to the economic injury from coronavirus. University Center and RLF applicants specifically must provide information on how the project aligns with the relevant SEDS, and RLF applicants must define the lending area for the supplemental award. Other documents that are included, is a letter stating that the applicant is ready, willing, and able to perform the scope of work. EDDs and tribes, as well as UC applicants, must also reaffirm the assurances in the ED 900A and CD 511 that were already provided for their existing awards.
For states that participate in the Single Point of Contact program under Executive Order 12372, applicants in those states must contact their state single point of contact as soon as possible. We provided here a list of states that participate in the program. You must include with your application evidence that you have contacted your single point of contact. It is not necessary, however, at this time to also provide the point of contact's response. We encourage you to go ahead and get your application into EDA while it's pending with the single point of contact. Once you do receive a response from your single point of contact, you must provide a copy of that response to EDA promptly after you receive it. Similarly, if the deadline for the point of contact to respond to you passes and you do not receive a response, you must promptly inform EDA of that fact. And the reason why it's so important to either promptly provide a response or to let us know that the deadline for a response is passed is that EDA will not be able to make an award until either a response is received or we've confirmed that the deadline has passed.
Applicants should submit their applications through grants.gov within 30 days of the date on their invitation letter. The applicable grants.gov link is included in the invitation letter and is specific to the region and the program. Once EDA receives the application, EDA may request additional clarifying information. And it's important to note here that applicants must be registered in SAM.gov at time of award, not necessarily at time of application.
If an applicant is having trouble finding the link in grants.gov, can they just search it out? Is it possible to just find it, or do they need to contact their EDR?
they will need to contact their EDR. The link is it's a hidden link specific to those who are in the program. Application review will cover a risk assessment as required by uniform guidance, including review of the applicant's past performance on federal awards. If EDA determines that the applicant poses an unacceptable risk for a non-competitive award, the applicant may still apply through the competitive process. EDA will review all submitted documents and determine whether the applicant's proposal implements the required scope of work, responds to the economic impacts of the pandemic, and meets all other requirements for funding under PWEDA. EDA may request revisions to the budget or staffing plan to meet EDA's or other federal requirements, and applicants that are determined to be responsive will be funded at the level provided in the final EDA approved budget.
Once EDA approves an award, you'll get notification in a letter with a CD 450, and you'll need to reply and accept that award within 30 days of getting that notification. You're also going to be required to submit 2 additional items within 60 days of that notice. One is a certificate of a completion of a waste, fraud, and abuse training, and the second is a grant administration plan. For RLFs, within 60 days, you're also going to be required to submit an RLF plan. RLFs are not permitted to make loans until they submit the RLF plan, so that early submission of that is probably in your best interest. Failure to do any of those may result in us terminating the award. A little bit more detail on those other requirements. For the waste, fraud, and abuse training, we're going to provide you with a PowerPoint that has the training in it, and you'll have to review it. And everybody in your organization that is responsible for managing your finances or overseeing contractors, subcontractors, or subgrantees must complete the training and sign it and return it to us within 60 days. By accepting the award, you agree to monitor your award for fraud, schemes, and common fraudulent activity. And if you find anything like that, you should report it to EDA and the Inspector General of the Department of Commerce as soon as possible. For the grant administration plan, it's a little bit more in-depth version of the project narrative. You're going to have to give us a list of tasks that you're going to undertake with enough details so we can monitor what you're doing, an explanation of those tasks, and identify it with each person that's in the staffing plan, a timeline for doing everything. And if you're going to hire additional staff to implement the project, it must include a hiring plan that includes target start dates for that staff. Upon approval by EDA, the grant administration plan will be incorporated into the award, and it's going to be an enforceable element of that award.
Grant administration plans are a little atypical of EDA awards, if I'm not mistaken. Why is one required for these non-competitive awards? Is it related to expediency?
Yeah, exactly. It's because when we are submitting you with a pre-approved documentation for the scope of work and the project narrative, and you have to fill that out, we haven't given you a lot of time to do that, and we need to make sure that you're fulfilling the needs of, you're willing to do the scope of work that we've given you, but this is a little bit an opportunity to give us a little bit more detail on how you're going to do it, which is of course important for us to make sure that the money is spent wisely and expeditiously, but also that you have a plan for accomplishing the purpose of that scope of award. So in summary, we're giving non-competitive awards as a means for expediting delivery of the funds because of the unusual and compelling circumstances presented by the coronavirus pandemic. It's affecting the entire country, and getting some of these funds for these particular scopes of work we deemed an important response part of for the country. They're only available to existing EDA partners with the capacity to begin implementing that process immediately. That's why we've excluded certain non-performing or the C-rated RLFs. They can, of course, still apply competitively if they want to, but they're not deemed immediately capable of doing it. Remember that time is of the essence because of the ongoing economic impacts of the pandemic, and that's why we're enforcing a 24-month period of performance. Again, you may request less than your maximum award amount, and in fact, if you don't think you can spend that money in that amount of time, please don't. That money will be reused in the competitive process, and we want to make sure we make the best use of that funds. And remember, non-competitive awards are only one aspect of this response. We're going to have lots of other awards that we're going to give out through the competitive process. And if your agency or organization, even though you got a non-competitive award, has other things or other work you want to do, please do apply through the competitive process, and we will consider it. There's more information available on all of this and other activities under the CARES Act at EDA.gov/coronavirus.
So we're going to go through some frequently asked questions now that we think might be helpful to our stakeholders. So to start, am I required to provide local matching share for non-competitive awards?
Nope. For non-competitive awards, we're going to fund 100% of the approved project costs up to the grant amount.
And so you talked about this, but is there really any harm in me requesting the maximum amount of funding, even though I might not be able to use it all?
Yes. We only have so much money to go around, and it's a nationwide need. If you request more than you need and you can't spend it, that is a foregone opportunity somewhere else on the part of EDA's response to the economic recovery. And it is time-limited money, so we only have a certain amount of time in which we can actually make it available to the communities. So if you can't spend it, we need you to let us know so that we can fund other meritorious projects.
May I use funds from a non-competitive award to pay for the costs of performing my existing EDA grant?
No, non-competitive award funds may only be used to pay for activities specified in the scope of work and grant administration plan. So only activities that are specific to this non-competitive project. And these activities must be in addition to the work performed under your existing award.
So I would like to undertake a project outside the standard scope of work. Can I request that EDA approve an exception for this?
No, as we said, these awards all have to use the same standardized scope of work. EDA cannot make any exceptions. That's a requirement of the non-competitive process.
May non-competitive award funds be used for technology to allow my staff to work from home during the pandemic?
Yes, non-competitive awards can be used to fund the cost of remote working due to the coronavirus, subject to the normal cost principle rules.
I have already incurred costs responding to the coronavirus pandemic. May I use funds from a non-competitive award to reimburse those?
No, pre-award costs are not eligible under the non-competitive awards.
Can I fund construction as part of my non-competitive award?
No, non-competitive awards may be used for non-construction costs only, although those costs can include equipment acquisition.
May I contact a third party to perform a portion of the project?
Yes, you can contract for services to perform the project. The normal rules for procurement under federal awards apply, though.
May I partner with local organizations or economic development organizations on activities or programs allowed under the standard scope of work?
Yes, you are definitely allowed to partner with other organizations, including local governments. There are a variety of mechanisms through which you might be able to do that, including contracting, and also as a possibility of subawarding to an eligible entity. One thing that is not allowed is co-recipient arrangements are not permitted in the non-competitive process. If you have questions about how you can partner with local governments or other organizations, please contact your economic development representative to work out the best procedure for doing that for your particular situation.
What types of costs are eligible for the administrative portion of an RLF grant?
So any costs that are necessary to support the administration of the supplemental lending capital or of the recipient's existing EDA-funded RLFs. Some examples include additional staffing to process new loans or loan modifications, technology upgrades, professional services costs, and audit costs. Technical assistance for borrowers is also allowable.
May I change the lending area of my supplemental RLF?
In most cases, really almost all cases, the lending area of the non-competitive supplemental RLF must be the same as the lending area of your existing RLF. So RLF recipients who are also designated district organizations may choose to have the lending area of the new RLF be the same as their EDD boundaries. So that's an exception to the general rule. So generally, the lending area must match the current lending area, but it's the case that a small number of district organizations have revolving loan funds with lending areas that are smaller than or not coterminous with their EDD boundaries. Those district organizations have the option to have a lending area that is coterminous with their EDD boundaries. However, RLF recipients may request an award amendment to change the lending area post-award. Such requests are subject to EDA's evaluation of the suitability of the proposed lending area, so it's not guaranteed. It's just that that would be an option to request an award amendment in the future if an entity would like to change the lending area of its non-competitive RLF award.
Is there a cap on indirect costs for non-competitive awards to universities?
No, there isn't. Recipients may charge the full amount of their indirect cost allowed by their NICRA, but recipients are not required to charge the full amount if they choose not to.
So I'm a recipient of a university center grant, but I'm not really familiar with SEDS consistency because that's not part of the application process for the university center program. How do I go about showing SEDS consistency for my supplemental award?
So you first need to determine which SEDS or SEDS equivalent areas are applicable to your university center service area. Once you've figured out if there is a SEDS that's applicable to your UC service area, then you just need to calibrate kind of your planned scope of work activities to be consistent with that SEDS.
Okay, thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar on non-competitive awards. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to reviewing your applications.